Florida is used to tourists, but there are visitors here nobody ever asked for. Hundreds of plants and animals have settled into the Sunshine State, clearly taking advantage of its hospitality. In total, more than 500 non-native species have been brought into Florida, and some of them don't cause much trouble. But many have turned into a threat to people, wildlife, and even the economy. And the local climate only helps the intruders. It makes their adaptation quick and easy. Today, invasive species cost Florida more than $500 million a year and have already taken over 1.7 million acres. The far south of the state has become a refuge for outsiders. There are more of them here than in any other region of the U.S. mainland. The only place worse is Hawaii, but we'll get to that another time. From ants to amphibians, from birds to fish and plants, South Florida has turned into an invasion hotspot for every possible taxonomic group. It's already impossible to exterminate them all. There are simply too many invaders. They're spreading faster than people can destroy them, and new species appear every year. It's an endless, pointless struggle. So, from time to time, someone asks, what if we resorted to biocontrol and released yet another non-native animal into Florida that would deal with all the previous ones? For example, a Komodo dragon? How to provoke a dragon. An unobtrusive reminder to do that thing under the video. The Komodo dragon is the largest lizard on the planet. Adult ones can stretch up to 10 feet and weigh over 308 pounds. More often, they're around 154 pounds, but that's still pretty hefty. All in all, the reptile looks like it was made to be an apex predator. A broad, flat head, a heavy snout, crooked legs, and a massive muscular tail. No wonder on their home islands, monitor lizards sit at the top of the food chain. They eat whatever they come across, from carrion to deer, buffalo, pigs, and even their own kind. And their appetite is insane. In one sitting, a lizard can swallow up to 80% of its own body weight. But the key point is they've been hunting outsiders for hundreds of years. Most of their current diet is made up of animals brought in by people. The lesser Sunda Islands, where the monitors live, were never connected to the mainland, and the only large herbivores there were dwarf elephants. Everything else I mentioned, deer, pigs, and other species, showed up together with humans. And the monitor adapted to that, turning into a universal hunter, equally effective at dealing with local and non-local animals. All in all, by every measure, it's the perfect versatile predator. Voracious, powerful, and second to none. In theory, this is exactly the kind of predator Florida needs. A Komodo dragon could keep virtually any invasive species in check, no exceptions. But the question is, can a creature from distant islands really survive in Florida? Turns out yes, and here it'll feel right at home, maybe even better than at home. On the lesser Sunda Islands in Indonesia, where Komodo dragons live, space is really scarce. It's a chain of small volcanic bits of land, tropics, heat, thick trees, dry season turning into wet. All in all, a paradise, but a damned cramped one. And in Florida, there's way more room. The food's much more varied, and the conditions are perfect for a whole army of dragons. Florida really takes the crown when it comes to outsiders, being home to more non-native reptiles and amphibians than anywhere else on the planet. The subtropical weather keeps the state warm and humid all year, making it a perfect spot for animals usually found only in isolated tropical forests or far-off islands. In short, the conditions seem almost tailor-made for Komodo dragons. Hunting won't be a problem for them either. These predators rely on patience and stealth. They lie in wait for hours in the bushes or tall grass, then strike at their prey with powerful paws and sharp claws. Their teeth come next, serrated, shark-like. South Florida, with its thickets and wide grassy fields, is perfect for ambushes. So there we have it. If Komodo dragons were brought to Florida, they'd survive. They wouldn't freeze or die from lack of shelter. On the contrary, they'd feel right at home. Florida might actually be the chance for monitor lizards to avoid extinction. The thing is, Komodo dragons once roamed a huge range, from the Indonesian islands all the way to Australia. But times have changed. Since the 1970s, the only place on Earth where you can find them is Komodo National Park. At first, their situation seemed relatively safe, even though from 1996 to 2021, the International Union for Conservation of Nature listed monitor lizards as vulnerable. Yes, there were fewer than 1,400 adults left, but the population was considered stable. and hunting and other threats barely affected them. Everything changed in 2021. That year, the IUCN moved Komodo dragons to the endangered species list. The reason wasn't poachers or disease, it's the climate. Models showed that by 2040, rising sea levels could swallow 30 to 70% of their habitat. You see where I'm going with this? If the monitor lizard's native islands really sink under the ocean in a couple of decades, Florida could become not just a new hunting ground, but also the perfect refuge where these animals could survive in the wild. What could the monitors offer in return? Well, for example, take out the wild hogs. In the spring of 2024, wild hogs practically took over large parts of Florida and haven't shown any signs of backing down since. These animals are descendants of pigs brought over by Spanish colonists back in the 16th century. But over time, they've gone feral and turned into a real nightmare for farmers and the ecosystem. Today, wild hogs are an invasive and highly destructive species spreading across nearly 36 states. Their numbers have been climbing for several decades. In Florida, the situation is especially worrying. It's among the 5 states most affected by the outbreak. Wild hogs are found near the Everglades and on farmland. They feed on corn and acorns, wreck crops, and even pose a direct threat to farmers. The damage they cause is huge. Hogs spread diseases among humans and animals, destroy farmland and forests, and the economic losses from their actions are estimated at around $1.5 million a year. Experts have already concluded the only way to keep their numbers in check is to eliminate every single one. But, as is usually the case with invasive species, it's easier said than done. And here's the real question. Wild hogs are fast, smart, and very hard to catch. So how do the monitor lizards intend to handle them? Actually, it's simple. A monitor lizard doesn't need to chase a hog. As I said, all it needs is a bush, tall grass, or the shade of a tree to lie in wait for its prey. And when that prey comes within striking distance, the monitor attacks. And if it does have to give chase, that's no problem either, because Komodo dragons can reach speeds of up to 12 miles per hour. The thing is, they almost never need to. You see, they have a far scarier weapon in their arsenal: venom. Monitor lizards have venom glands, and their toxins sharply lower blood pressure, cause severe bleeding, prevent blood from clotting, and lead to shock. Sharp teeth and powerful neck muscles tear flesh, leaving gaping wounds, so prey that manages to escape only gains a short reprieve. The venom does its work, and the monitor lizard calmly follows the trail, guided by the scent of blood. It can track its victim for hours until it collapses. Then it's time to eat. That makes hogs an ideal target for a monitor lizard. Ambush, bite, and then, if needed, slow and relentless pursuit until the animal dies from blood loss. Real data backs this up. At a zoo, a 99-pound monitor lizard was once seen completely swallowing an 88-pound hog. Another lizard of the same size handled a 66-pound hog in 17 minutes. In the wild, there have even been cases of monitor lizards killing hogs in just seconds. So we basically have all the proof we need that the Komodo dragon is the perfect predator for wild hogs in Florida. Who else is on the list of particularly nasty invasive animals? All right, Burmese pythons. This is yet another trouble for Florida. These snakes aren't native. They're invasive species that have already dealt a crushing blow to the local wildlife. And we're not talking about harmless racers here, but one of the biggest snakes in the world. In Florida, adult pythons usually reach lengths of 6 to 9 feet, but the records are way more impressive. The largest one ever caught in the state stretched over 18 feet. Imagine 6 human steps, and the snake still doesn't end. The problem is that pythons are generalist predators. When scientists examined their stomachs, they found the remains of just about anything: mammals, birds, reptiles, even rare protected species. Pythons can eat prey weighing up to 100% of their own body weight. With such an appetite, they decimate local populations, completely emptying ecosystems in some regions. Researchers are still assessing the full extent of the damage, but it's already obvious that an adult Burmese python has almost no natural enemies. Humans are the only hunters, and even then not always successful. This is where the Komodo dragon comes into play. On its native islands, it lives side by side with reticulated pythons, the longest snakes in the world. and the third heaviest too. So a Burmese python wouldn't seem like some monstrous creature to a Komodo dragon, something impossible to handle, but more like an ordinary snack. And while I couldn't find examples of Komodo dragons attacking pythons, there's plenty of information about other large monitor lizards. For example, the Australian parentee hunts venomous snakes really well, like mulga snakes. They're actually a regular part of the monitor's diet. And in this video, there's another monitor of a different species, but the snake attacks it just like a python would attack a Komodo dragon, wrapping around its body. And the monitor manages to fight it off. However, it's not all so simple here, because large pythons are still something a monitor lizard should watch out for. A couple of years ago, a video went viral online. A giant Burmese python regurgitated a very big monitor lizard. It was filmed in Thailand. A few conclusions immediately come to mind. On one hand, a python can indeed kill a monitor lizard. That means a Komodo giant will have to be more careful when hunting. On the other hand, the footage didn't show a Komodo monitor, but its smaller relative. Komodo monitors have much better chances. Only the very young lizard should fear meeting a snake. An adult monitor could simply switch to smaller pythons, younger prey, and would always come out on top. The whole story isn't exactly clear. It's not certain that the python actually killed that lizard. Maybe it just picked it up already dead. And then the story looks completely different. By the way, regurgitation works both ways. There are known cases where monitor lizards themselves regurgitated pythons. And that means a monitor lizard is quite capable of killing and eating a snake, even if it's not a Komodo dragon but a smaller species. Everything sounds like a perfect plan. Hogs make good food, pythons too, and the list could go on forever. Florida has no shortage of outsiders, mammals, birds, reptiles, and the monitor lizard can turn them all into prey. Sounds tempting? Don't get too excited yet. Let's first look at the pitfalls. Moreover, Florida already has experience with other monitor lizards, and to put it mildly, it hasn't gone well. We're talking about the Nile monitor. This semi-aquatic lizard doesn't naturally live in Florida, but once it showed up here, it quickly became an invasive species. It's versatile in every possible way. It hunts on land, underground, in trees, in fresh and salt water, and it basically eats anything that moves, or doesn't move. Crabs, crayfish, mussels, snails, slugs, termites, caterpillars, beetles, spiders, grasshoppers, crickets, fish, frogs, toads, lizards, turtles, snakes, baby crocodiles, birds and their eggs, small mammals. In short, the list just goes on forever. The sprawling network of canals in South Florida only made things easier for them. These canals became corridors for spreading out. As a result, the Nile monitor turned into a serious threat to species protected at both the state and federal level. Sea turtles, wading birds, gopher tortoises, and even the American crocodile were all at risk. The situation in Cape Coral looks particularly worrying. It's home to the largest population of burrowing owls in Florida, and at the same time, the largest known population of Nile monitors. Ecologists are also noticing the disappearance of pets and even feral cats in the area. The Nile monitor also competes with local predators. In Africa, they're known to raid crocodile nests, eat eggs, and hunt young crocodiles. Naturally, such behavior could happen in a new location too. Overall, Florida already has one non-native monitor, and it's brought nothing to nature but trouble. But let's just put it in perspective. Nile monitors usually grow from just over 3 feet to more than 6 feet. The largest can get up to 8 feet. Their weight, though, varies a lot. Some studies report 1.8 to 3.3 pounds, others 13 to 33 pounds. That's quite something, but still nowhere near the records. Now look at the Komodo dragon. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, males can reach 10 feet and tip the scales at over 308 pounds. The difference is massive. You could even say one Komodo dragon weighs as much as a whole group of Nile monitors. And this is where it gets really interesting. If a relatively small and gluttonous monitor like the Nile monitor has already caused so many problems in Florida, just imagine what a Komodo dragon would do. But even if we set aside the simple logic of the bigger the animal, the bigger the trouble, there's another scenario. 2 monitors, 2 different sizes. The Nile monitor has already taken the niche of a small predator that eats pretty much anything, but big prey is out of its reach, and this is exactly where the Komodo dragon comes in. It's big, powerful, and capable of hunting mammals that are completely out of the Nile monitor's league. In the end, it's not about swapping one species for another, but about creating a partnership. Two ravenous predators will exist side by side, one eating eggs, birds, and small critters, the other going after everything else, from boars to deer. For the monitor lizards, it'll be an all-you-can-eat buffet, but for the local fauna, a catastrophe. Speaking of local fauna, what's the situation with the predators there? The Komodo dragon will have to share space with them somehow. South Florida is the only place where the American crocodile and the Mississippi alligator live side by side. These are local predators, and obviously they don't need any biological control. On the islands, Komodo monitors don't have any rivals like that. Alligators never made it here, and saltwater crocodiles, which used to be found in coastal areas and mangrove swamps, have long disappeared. So for the monitor, this is a new and unfamiliar enemy. At first, it might not even know how to deal with crocodiles. We also don't have a single example in the wild where these species have met each other. All we can do is make guesses, and these guesses don't favor the monitor. Alligators and crocodiles are huge, fierce, some of the deadliest reptiles in the world. Male Mississippi alligators reach 10 to 16 feet in length and weigh hundreds of pounds. Their dark, thick scales protect them well from attacks. On land, they may seem clumsy, but in the water, they turn into fearsome swimmers with tails that act like a screw and also like a club. They grab their prey suddenly and perform a death roll, tearing chunks of flesh. Their bite force exceeds 136 atmospheres, enough to crush bones easily. Of course, the Komodo dragon isn't defenseless either. It has sharp claws, a muscular tail, and a dangerous bite with venom glands. Cornered, it can swing its tail or slash with its claws. But against an alligator, that might not be enough. It has too thick skin, powerful jaws, and the advantage in water. If the fight happens on land, the dragon could use its agility to strike first. In shallow water or swamps, the advantage almost certainly goes to the alligator. And even if they faced off at the same weight and length, the alligator would win thanks to its jaws, plus the ability to drown its opponent. So in its natural habitat, the Komodo dragon is the undisputed master, the apex predator with nothing to fear. But in Florida, it would have to step aside at the top of the food chain. The next opponent, the Florida panther. This is a separate population of the North American cougar that survived only in South Florida. It lives in pine forests, tropical pine savannas, and freshwater swamps. It's the only confirmed population of cougars in the eastern U.S., and now it occupies a mere 5% of its historic range. As of 2024, about 200 individuals remain in the wild. And let's be clear, in Florida, the panther is the real boss. It's the apex predator that almost no one can challenge, but the species is dying out. The main threats are habitat loss, plus car collisions and fights between panthers over territory. And now it seems we're about to bring into Florida an animal that might even prey on panthers. And this is the second time already. Burmese pythons can attack panthers, and sometimes they actually eat them. For the local mammals, this must have been a shock. They just don't know how to deal with these huge invasive snakes. The Komodo dragon isn't much different in this sense, a big venomous beast, and nobody really knows what to do with it. The panther has claws, teeth, speed, agility, but all of that becomes meaningless if a dragon jumps out of hiding and lands a successful bite. The panther will die from blood loss. A Burmese python still needs to be pretty huge to swallow its prey whole. A Komodo dragon doesn't have that problem. It can tear chunks off, so even a big cat would get eaten completely. All in all, a panther's hardly a threat to a Komodo dragon. If anything, we'd be introducing a new apex predator that would finish off a species already on the brink of extinction. But there's one more factor we can't overlook: cane toads. We recently mentioned that they can be deadly to Komodo dragons. That's because back in the toad's homeland, Australia, lizards die en masse from their poison. No local predators are adapted to their toxin. But back then, it was mostly theoretical, because cane toads don't live in the Komodo dragon's habitat. But if we move the dragons to Florida, the threat would become real. Toads were brought here back in the 1930s and 40s to deal with sugarcane pests, with more introductions in the 1950s and 60s. Some escaped or were released by importers. Anyway, now cane toads are all over central and southern Florida. Today, they're considered a threat to local wildlife and even pets. Serious enough that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission actually recommends people kill them on sight. And just imagine, we spend money, effort, time to bring Komodo dragons to Florida, and it all ends with them just dying after ingesting toxic toads? Experts think that over time, the dragons might learn to recognize the toxin and stop eating them, but until that happens, too many will die. Maybe enough to sink the entire biocontrol project before it even gets off the ground. But even if we assume the dragons survive encounters with alligators, crocodiles, and cane toads, there's still one more problem waiting for them in Florida: people. Actually, it's people who are going to have a problem. Florida's a densely populated area, especially its southern coast. Now remember, the original home of Komodo dragons is isolated islands, which themselves became a national park. There aren't many people there, mostly small villages, so attacks on humans are rare. But they still happen. Local guides say that Komodo dragons' jaws are so powerful they can snap a human leg in half. And from time to time, these stories turn out to be true. A tourist strays off the trail, a dragon ambushes them, a child is playing in the bushes, a dragon attacks. Usually these are isolated incidents, but only because very few people are around. Still, they do happen. 4 years ago, a construction worker on Rinca Island helping to build a resort was brutally bitten by dragons and had to be taken to the hospital by boat. In 2007, a Komodo dragon killed an 8-year-old boy, the first fatal incident in 33 years. In 2009, a 31-year-old man fell from a tree and 2 dragons waiting below pounced on him. He died from multiple bites and blood loss. Plus, you have to keep in mind that monitor lizards get aggressive when they're disturbed, and if there are not just dozens but thousands of people around in Florida, the risk increases many times over. You can also safely assume there will be trash cans and dumps nearby that will attract them. They'll start coming to human homes more often, venturing deeper into towns, and it won't end well. And even if we forget about the alligators, the toads, and the threat to humans, there's still a risk that simply can't be ignored. Komodo dragons won't bother figuring out who they're allowed to eat. They hunt anything that moves. As usual, the plan looks nice on paper. The dragon eats pythons, boars, and other outsiders. The local species are thriving. But in reality, why would it risk a fight with a python if there's plenty of easier, safer prey around? Coyotes, raccoons, lynxes, opossums, rabbits, all these animals have already suffered from Burmese pythons and are nearly gone. The Komodo dragon won't save them. It'll just finish off what's left. And at the same time, it'll add some new local animals to the victim list, bigger and juicier ones. So instead of saving the ecosystem, we end up with yet another threat to it. The experiment with Komodo dragons in Florida is hardly going to solve the problem. It's more likely to just make things worse. Here's another point that's easy to miss. Hogs aren't just gluttonous creatures that breed like crazy. They're incredibly smart. Hunters are already noticing. Put even a little pressure on them and they immediately change their behavior. They become nocturnal, hide in thick forests, vanish into swamps, and then finding them is almost impossible. That's why hunting hogs usually just makes the problem worse. In some states, hunting is completely banned because the result is always the same. Kill a couple of them, the rest learn to avoid people. Now imagine Komodo dragons hunting the hogs instead of humans. At first, things would look promising. In the first few years, the dragons would actively suppress the population. But after 5 to 10 years, the hogs would adapt. They'd learn to avoid the dragons just like they learned to avoid humans. And once again, they'd vanish into the darkness of swamps and thickets. The result? The elusive and dangerous invasive species, the hog, would adapt. And the Komodo dragons, losing their easy prey, would start looking for someone simpler. And overall, history shows that introducing one species rarely helps get rid of another introduced species. Almost always, the result is the same. We end up with yet another invasive pest. And it's clear the same will happen with Komodo dragons. After that, the government will have to shell out, and quite a lot. Just between 2008 and 2015, Florida's federal and regional authorities spent around $125 million fighting invasive aquatic plants. In 2018, the Wildlife Department allocated $250,000 to research ways to remove invasive lionfish, just lionfish alone. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. According to a study by Auburn University, invasive species have cost the U.S. $1.22 trillion since 1960. And that number, of course, keeps growing every year. If Komodo dragons were actually brought to Florida, they'd just add another line to the expenses. So the neat idea of biocontrol would very quickly turn into a harsh reality. Good thing it remains just an idea. You owe me a like. See you later.